Shemai Sitahi Kroisoi Chris Dewey, what is cracking, ladies, gents, boys, girls, and anybody who is anyone. Today we are talking about the fourth and final book in the sorcery series, The Crown of Kings. And this bad boy is written by Steve Jackson. Now this book is thick, it is dummy thick. It's 800 references long. 800 references long, boys and girls. Most of these books tend to be 400 references long, so this is like the size of 2 books. And I love it. I love it because it's 800 references of just phenomenal goodness. This is like the pinnacle of fighting fantasy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go through procedure. Let's talk about the book, when it's published, and about the covers. So I suppose let's go. Oh yeah, this book was published back in the 80s by Puffin back in 1985. And like I said, it's the 4th in the sorcery series. So you know you're in for something good, don't you? But yeah, so it's published back in the 80s, probably back in the early 2000s or 2010s. And then so on and so forth. I do not believe that this book has actually been republished under Scholastic. Because the last one wasn't, and it wouldn't make sense. No, this one hasn't been republished under Scholastic, but it was reprinted back in 2003. So I was almost right. There's not a whole lot to say about it, guys. It is a fantastic book, and I really can't say anything other than it's just fantastic. So whilst I try and think of a way to word how I feel about it, let's talk about the covers, because that's pretty easy. So let's start off with the Puffin, and the Puffin covers. Oh, it's actually pretty cool. You've got the guy, I think he's like an archmage. I can't remember what the actual word is off the top of my head, because I just thought of him as the bad guy and I moved on. It's gonna say on the back of the book, and what is it? What is this man's name? It doesn't actually say. That's fun, isn't it? So yeah, you got this bad guy. He's got the Crown of Kings. He's sort of looking out over the snow-capped mountains. He is chuffed. He's got like little demon things. It's cool. It's actually quite light-hearted. Yeah, because the guy looks quite sinister, quite creepy. But at the end of the day, it looks a bit like Narnia, doesn't it? It's not a bad cover. It just feels quite anticlimactic, quite light-hearted, considering the severity of the situation. But I think it's about time that we just move on to the Wizards cover, because the Wizards cover, I can actually hold that bad boy in my hand, because I'm purchasing the Wizards editions. There's not a whole lot else to it. And the Wizards edition is actually, it's pretty cool. You've got the same bad guy. He's casting magic. It's very intense. He's green. His hair looks nuts. And you got the crown in the background. It's actually, like I said, pretty cool. Quite intense, quite cinematic, quite climactic, considering that this is the final book in the sorcery line. I think this cover is actually really cool. It's for some reason, again, this one feels a lot like a Yu-Gi-Oh card, kind of that sort of art, where it's all like quite fantastical, quite anime-like. But either way, I do really enjoy this cover. It's really cool. It's one of the ones I remembered from my childhood. And yeah, you know, I want to say there's no bias in this one, but obviously there's going to be bias in this one, because I do prefer the Wizards edition. It's going to be the first one comes to, first place goes to the Wizards edition, the second place goes to Puffin. It is what it is. But let's talk about the story a bit. So I'm just going to read the back of the book, and it says, "The legendary Crown of Kings is at last within your grasp." Or is it? At the end of your long trek, you face the unknown terrors of Mampang Fortress. But beware, for if you have not defeated the 7 serpents, your arrival has been anticipated. And yeah, that's about it. It's a really good book, really good story. It actually feels quite like an adventure, you know. I sat down, and whilst reading it, I felt like, wow, this is a bit like Lord of the Rings. Now, I was going to say, if Lord of the Rings was a book, obviously it is a book. But you get what I mean. It's quite a trek. You travel so far to do this, I suppose, carry out your mission. And this is the book where you actually get to do it if you don't get game overed. And it was weird. It was weird going into this one, because obviously you sort of know what you're getting yourself into, but with this one, it's 800 references. It's a massive book, and you're like, wow, how long is this adventure going to be? And in all honesty, I think that they probably could have made the adventure a bit longer, but you know, it's honestly fantastic. Whether or not you're seeing the she satires, which are probably, I'm gonna say, my favourite NPC monster because of just how weird they are. And it's a bit racy, the artwork is. Maybe that's why they wouldn't have been able to redo the art now, because you are seeing, I suppose, exposed breasts. They're funny characters except for that, I suppose. Which, again, you know, I think they had to edit something out of the House of Hell, because there's a depiction of a woman that seemed a bit naughty. So then, you know, this is fine for some reason. I really enjoyed that encounter. They were quite fun. And then there's like this little tiny little thing that screams with massive feet. I want to say the yib yib. I like that, dude. But yeah, this story's actually really good. It's actually really nice. It's very reminiscent of the Citadel of Chaos in the sense that you are trying to get into the castle and then you're in it, and then that's just sort of how the story plays out with you traversing the fortress. But I mean, if it's not broken, don't fix it. It works, and it works well. There's also less of having to remember references and stuff and modifiers from previous books. This book felt very much self-contained, and yeah, there are elements in which you would have to maybe use items that you collected in previous books, and I think maybe it might be a game over. It sends you back to book 2 for some reason, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Book 2, what one was that? That was, I think it was the bad one, wasn't it? Horrible feeling, it was the one I didn't like. But yeah, this is the thing, this is actually such a decent book. It's a decent story, and to top it all off, this one isn't actually that difficult. It hasn't made itself difficult for the sake of being difficult, very much like the Creature of Havoc, and as a result, it's just an enjoyable read. It is a pleasant read, it's a fun read, and you're going in expecting to end off this like fantastical adventure, and every single step of the way feels quite rewarding. Every single encounter, you know, like a few more encounters, game over, you've won, you can go home and be a billionaire or whatever. I actually don't think you get rewarded in this one. I think it just says you can go home and rest. There's even callbacks to characters from previous books, and I thought that was really cool. There's a character from the Shabutanti Hills. I think there's another one then, I want to say from the City Port of Traps, and although I didn't like the City Port of Traps, yeah, I think he was from the City Port of Traps. But like, you got these callbacks to characters that you've just genuinely forgotten. And then to top it all off, all the characters in this book genuinely feel quite fleshed out, because obviously, you know, there are 4 books to work on them. And although they're not necessarily the ones introduced into this book, the previous characters, they are very fleshed out. You know, there's even like an encounter in this book towards, dare I say, the final third, where there's a guy and he just seems like a genuine person. The NPCs in this book are written really well. The encounters feel really good. They're quite nice. They're quite, although, you know, they are very much like Final Fantasy encounters where it's like, do you want to attack this guy or do you want to cast a spell? There's not a whole lot of depth to them. They are quite nice. You know, the ecosystem with the monsters makes sense again, which is something that I really didn't like about Forest of Doom. But in this one, it just sort of, it's weird stuff inside this castle, and then it's revealed to you that it just makes sense. Not going to spoil why, but it makes sense. And you might be sat there, you might be thinking, well, Chris, is there anything bad about this book? And weirdly enough, no, it's not bad. I've read that the ending is quite open-ended, and that it's quite rushed, it's quite sloppy, and I don't know, it worked, it was suitable. You don't really find out what's happening. It is actually pretty, it's not very simple, it's quite messy, but it does the job. It does the job. And although you're not like a billionaire by the end of the book, it feels quite nice to just be over with your massive quest. And without spoiling too much, the ending is very much reminiscent to Lord of the Rings, which I didn't expect. And I was like, oh, it feels like Lord of the Rings. And then when I sat down, I was like, yeah, this is probably based off the ending of Lord of the Rings. So there is that. The ending's quite messy. But apart from that, there's not really a whole lot bad to say about the book. It's all really, really good. It's all really, really good and really, really interesting. There's a part where it asks, are you playing as a warrior or a wizard? I thought that was pretty cool. That was pretty... It's weird, like, to actually have the choice, because with a lot of the other books, it's you're just both, because you can be. Like, even the end boss was actually pretty cool. Now, the end boss, on one hand, he's really cool. On the other hand, he's quite anticlimactic. It's not what you'd expect, and it is what it is. It is what it is. There's not a whole lot you could say. It would have been nice for it to have been what you would have expected, in the sense that it would have felt more satisfying, but in it being not what you expected, you don't really lose a lot. You sort of fight a very difficult monster and then you just move on with your life. You've completed your mission, and the way that it actually happens is actually pretty cool anyway. I'm sort of sat at the end of this video now and I'm thinking I haven't really said a whole lot, because there's not a whole lot I want to say, because at the end of the day the adventure is so good I want you to go out and experience it yourself. And maybe it calls for a video on the sorcery series as a whole, like a brief summary to just review it as if it was one book. I'm not really sure, because as far as books go, this one is just a fantastic ending to such a long journey. And if you maybe you're like me, where you're reading these on a weekly basis, just once a week, it's kind of nice, because the week before last I was somewhere, the week before last again I was in the City Port of Traps, and the week before last I was in the Shabatanti Hills. So it just genuinely feels quite weird for that journey to be coming to an end, for me to be going back now to reading one-shots and books that have no real relationship to the other books. So I suppose I'm going to have to summarize this video, summarize the book, and say that, yeah, I think that if you are on the fence about buying this book, then you definitely should. If you are if you've read the previous 3 books and you're trying to just gain like some sort of idea as to what you're in for a really good read. This adventure is honestly really good. There's 800 references. Like, think about how many different scenarios that could lead to. So many different scenarios, and it's such an amazing book. If maybe you haven't read the previous 3, I'd honestly recommend getting all 4. And this is the thing, it's a bit tricky to get hold of this one, because obviously you have to gonna get it second hand. I personally got gouged for some reason. I'm pretty sure like one person bought out the entire stock on eBay and then just put an additional £10 on top of the price tag. I'm not complaining, but like seeing it for £10 cheaper like a week after is a bit annoying, but it is ultimately what it is. When you look at Fighting Fantasies, The Crown of Kings, the final book in the sorcery line, what you're looking at is honestly a fantastic ending to a fantastic series. The pinnacle of Fighting Fantasy itself, dare I say, is the sorcery series. It's very much the pedigree out of the litter of maybe not mutts, but maybe runts. You know, and yeah, there are going to be good one-off Fighting Fantasy books. But when it comes down to the sorcery series, what you have is 4 books of fantastic depth, fantastic characters, fantastic monsters and encounters and lands. And seeing that the Crown of Kings is now finally over, it's like coming to the end of a film series such as, you know, Marvel's Avengers, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. It sort of carries that same impact where you get to leave that land now, and you can return whenever, but it's done and dusted. It kind of leaves you feeling kind of sad. And not sad in a way that you're gonna cry, because it's just awful, but it's just kind of bittersweet. It's quite somber, it's quite, you know, you have to move on kind of thing. And I suppose that is the thing, you know, the series of books themselves were fantastic, and I'm only gonna say that they were fantastic, and you can read my reviews about them on Goodreads. I think they're all really, really good, apart from City Port of Traps, which is just awful. So it's going to be weird moving on to the regular Fighting Fantasy books that are very much one-shots that I do in an evening. But it is what it is. So do I recommend The Crown of Kings? Yeah, without a doubt, it's a fantastic book. It's such a good book. I 100% recommend it. So I suppose it's time to say goodbye, ladies and gents. So I want to say thank you if you've watched this far. It means a lot to me, to be honest. And I just hope that you have a really nice day. I hope you have a really nice week. I hope you have a really nice month. And I just hope that you have a really nice time until I see you next. So, without further ado,